think one of the things that also goes back to what you asked about education and educators is that many Indigenous groups have different ways of teaching, different learning styles, teaching styles. How do people know? And yes, our Indigenous Studies program is navigating a Euro-Western institution, a predominantly white institution here at Northern Michigan University. But I think what I try to let people know is we're trying to use the avenue given us to talk about these difficult questions, even if it means confronting what is a Euro-Western academic lens, what does it do to erase Indigenous people, and how can we fight that, and how can we combat against that. I think you'll find with elementary educators, they know that telling a story to students is going to resonate with students. Everybody loves a good story, right? And so the idea of storytelling is a deeply rooted teaching tool within Indigenous ways of learning. So the idea and the power of stories, scholar Joanne Archibald calls it story work, Indigenous story work, because to really be able to successfully tell a story and have those teachings of values and lessons come through in a manner that's going to be impactful, that takes skill. That takes time and practice and dedication to the story itself. And we believe that that story is medicine. It has its own spirit. Our songs are medicine. They have their own spirit. And so there's power in song. There's power in stories, and they're medicine. And because Indigenous people taught that way, and not in a school structure, not in desks in rows that was introduced with the that was introduced with the boarding schools, which is what my teacher is. My T-shirt is a commentary on boarding schools. Those structures and those systems fought against that way of storytelling and ignored the spirit and medicine in those stories. And by doing so, Indian people were disconnected, and we're fighting and finding our way back. That's what it's, that resurgence, that idea of Indigenous resurgence, is finding ourselves back in the forest on our terms, not solely because of where we're at in this distinct historical moment in time, but on our terms, with our languages, with our cultural ways. That's what that resurgence means. And so back to the educators and encouraging educators make that shift as well. That might mean changing how they actually convey their teaching styles. Like, how do they teach in their own classrooms? Like that little helper that just came skittering about here, that forest family member, because of the word people, it still is human centric, right?
Yeah.
So I think how do we phrase it so that we recognize that their hood has equal value to our hood?
It's true.
It's true.
Yeah.
So, but I think we use people because we know how to empathize with people. We know how to empathize because we recognize what is it going to do to humankind if something happens to the planet. We don't necessarily get up and stand up, what's going to happen to our wild rice beds if something happens with the planet? And so I'm urging us to take that and adopt that sense and concept of peoplehood and apply it widely, not necessarily labeling it peoplehood widely, but that idea of empathy. We understand what it is when a small child has something horrific happen to it, but we don't necessarily apply that to that little chipmunk that just ran by. And yet that little chipmunk has a family and is doing what it has to do with nature, just like our human babies, right? And so learning and taking the time, this is the tough part, taking the time to learn and stop and think and saunter. One of my colleagues, Amy Cree-Dunn, uses the word saunter all the time. Having those moments with our feet planted firmly on the earth and allowing that life force to enter us helps us to slow down, helps us mentally to pause and take in what's around us. It opens up our eyes, it opens up our ears, it opens up our heart. And we truly can't learn from stories if all of those are not operating in tandem. from the concept, from
Yeah.
concepts like that. We can use them as tools, but they're like seeds that help us plant a bigger garden. And so that's one seed that I would ask us to think about, is looking at peoplehood as a concept, or any concept as seeds, but really also knowing that we have to tend to our cognitive gardens all the time, and giving them attention. That semantics of natural resources, where are you in that? Where are you? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, that it's a removal and it's a disconnect.
It is. It really is.
And so we're trying to build those connections. We in Native Studies are trying to build those connections and help shift that paradigm to saying we're a part of this. We are equally part of that source. So just as the earth teaches us, is our ultimate teacher, and the animals can teach us, and the monarch butterflies can teach us, and the fish can teach us. We teach each other, but we have to do so in a way that's respectful of the worldviews, that natural law, because it's going to happen whether we like it or not. We have to respect it on the natural laws terms. And some people would say, well, that's an Anishinaabe worldview. Well, it's the Earth's view.
Exactly.
And we as Anishinaabe people in this territory, at least, my mother being from Haudenosaunee territory, and other indigenous peoples around the globe, you hear over and over and over again, they have a connection to and relationship with their natural surroundings. And I don't even like to call it natural surroundings, but their surroundings, their home, their space. And so many systems and structures have sought to destroy those, to put up things that may or may not last beyond the next devastating catastrophe of what the earth has to offer. I think COVID, the pandemic, provided us a time of stillness and silence that some of us were allowed to really contemplate what that means on a couple of levels, because we couldn't be connected with each other, and yet we're still interconnected. We couldn't be connected with elders, which was nerve-wracking because we were losing these massive amounts of knowledge when these elders were in vulnerable situations and passing, whether it be their language knowledge, whether it be their understanding distinctly of what that great pine means, or what those oak tree means, or what the maple's gifts are. I don't know all of those things yet. I rely on my elders for that information. And so knowing that the pandemic has caused that stillness and that silence, we were so eager to get back into what was considered normal. But some of us kind of appreciate the stillness and silence still, and trying to figure out what is it we need to be learning from the earth and what's happening, because we feel it's a message.